Accessible Hope began in a small country of Sierra Leone, West Africa. And certainly it came with a group of women from Seattle, Washington, of all places, just a little bit north of my hometown, Puyallup, Washington, by the way. If you can spell it and say it, we might be a little prize for you later. Well, they asked Kim Carbo to assist them in strategizing a way to meet the needs of women affected by disability in Sierra Leone. In this country, which at that time had only recently come through and survived a very brutal civil war that many of you may be very familiar with if you've seen the various movies and different books are out there. A war which left many more people with disabilities than otherwise would have been normal in any other country. From the initial meeting, Kim, back in June 2009, Women of Hope was established and the work of Sierra Leone began. One of the women who was in that initial focus group, which were assembled to hear the stories of women with disabilities and gain a better understanding of the needs and desires of this group, later became a staff member of that organization. Adama Conte was blinded by measles as a toddler. In her grief over her tiny daughter's plight, Adama's mother did all she could to try to protect her from the various challenges and further harm and danger that would come to her. But as Adama grew, her older brother saw that her mother's care was overprotective of what was taking place and was concerned that really that protection that that overprotection was going to further harm Adama and, quite frankly, the entire family. And so when she was 6 years of age, her brother had kidnapped her and took her to the capital city of Freetown and enrolled her into the boarding school for the blind that was located there. He knew that his sister had the only chance to be able to survive and live an independent and productive life through that school. Adama attended the Milton Margay School for the Blind and received a good education through the 6th grade. From there, she was mainstreamed into middle school and high school and went on to attend teachers college to become an educator. Along with being a single mother of 2 children, Adama currently holds 3 jobs. One, she's the prefect of the United Methodist Primary School. She's an elected city council member for the McKinney City Council. And lastly, she's an advocacy officer for the Women of Hope of Sierra Leone, the Sierra Leonean branch of Accessible Hope International. We are very thrilled this evening to have Adama here with us tonight, all the way from Sierra Leone, to share with us some of her own story of transformation and to tell us more about her work among the women with disabilities in Sierra Leone. Please, would you welcome with me Adama Conte.
Thank you, Ken. Good evening. As Ken mentioned, I have been blind since I was very small. Because of that, I do not remember anything about me being sighted. I spent the majority of my early life in school, surrounded by other children and adults who were blind as well. That created a very comfortable environment for me as we all shared the same struggles and challenges. I did not see my parents again, however, until I was in junior high. My brother was afraid that if I go home for holidays, my mother will prevent me from going back. And he was right. My parents never went to school, and they didn't have a context for what education could do for me. They wanted to keep me near them so I would be safe. When I did finally return home as a teenager, my daddy had already died. And indeed, my mother did try to stop me from returning to school for high school. But I had now gotten a glimpse of what education would do for me, and I insisted that I return to finish my education. Going to a mainstream school education had a lot of challenges for me. Braille and audio books are not readily available in Sierra Leone. So, to succeed in my education, I had to braille all of the textbooks and literature books chapter by chapter on my own as my friend read them to me. When I went to college, I was living in Freetown, the capital city. The blind school I attended earlier allowed those of us in college to live there and commute to school. The teachers' college I was attending was on the other side of town. I had to use public transportation, which is not as accessible as it is in America, and my journey to and fro college each day required 3 transfers and some walking. It was very stressful to do this while being blind. People would try to take advantage of me, and I was often afraid. One time, a man offered me a ride to school while I was waiting for a taxi. I thought he was being kind. But soon I realized the noises outside the car were not familiar, and the road did not feel the same either. I began to think we were not going the right way. I told him the drive seemed to be taking too long. He told me he was using a different road because of traffic, but I became suspicious. I finally put down my window and asked out the window where I was. A lady near the car answered me. I was in a completely different part of town. I became very frightened and grabbed the lady's hand, asking her to help me. She did, and I was able to return to the blind school safely. These are some of the many challenges I faced trying to ensure my education. Sometimes I wanted to quit. Fortunately, I had a mentor, a blind woman who was older than me. Who continuously encouraged me to persevere for a better life. She was the only blind woman I knew who had achieved that level of education and employment, and I followed her example. After college, I took various volunteer positions, helping in blind associations in Sierra Leone. This gave me work experience and confidence to apply for teaching positions. I applied to 10 primary schools in McKinney Town, where I lived, and I was actually accepted in all 10 of them. Then I had to decide which one to take. I settled in the United Methodist Primary School. While I was teaching there, some friends told me about a new non-profitable organization which was advertising for positions. I told my friends I was not interested because non-profit organization jobs in Sierra Leone are full of politics. But they told me to try. So I applied to Women of Hope for 2 vacant positions without much hope for success. I have heard about Women of Hope because when they came to McKinney to start the program 2009, I was part of the focus group of blind women who gathered to share with them our experiences. but I didn't really think I would get the position working for them. As God would have it, I did get the job at Women of Hope, and I have worked ever since. My job is not actually the one I applied for, but a new position was created for me that was well suitable to my skills and talents. I am now the advocacy officer for Women of Hope in Sierra Leone, serving over 600 women with disabilities in the northern province of Sierra Leone. My family was Muslim, but the Milty Magai School for the Blind was a Christian school. Because I came to understand the Christian faith while in school, when I moved to McKinney, I began going to the United Methodist Church. But my faith was not very deep. Working at Women of Hope has really grown my faith and made it very personal to me. When I began working at Women of Hope, I had experienced so much discrimination in my life that I had become bitter and angry. I would get very angry at just anything people did. But as I listened to the teachings of the Word of God that Women of Hope brought to me, that every human being is made in the image of God Himself, and that I have as much value as any other able person, it began to change me. Prior working at Women of Hope, I had really only associated with blind people. But at Women of Hope, I began to meet with all types of women with disabilities, and I worked in unity with people who did not have a disability. I began to experience God's love for me in a completely different way. I had gone to church for a while, and I would have called myself a Christian, but I struggled for years to understand why God made me blind. As I worked at Women of Hope, helping other women, realizing my potentials, and spending time daily in the Word of God, I began to realize that this was the reason why God made me blind. To have the chance to know Christ, to be a voice for those who had no voice, and to elevate the position of people with disability throughout the country. My job at Women of Hope is to advocate for justice for women who don't know their rights and who are being oppressed. Women with disabilities are often discriminated and treated badly in various aspects of society. Many of them are raped, abused, evicted without notice, neglected by their own families, and left without support. It is my passion and joy to come alongside women in a very difficult circumstances, to support them, get what is their right, and bring justice to bear. One example is a woman named Mankapur who had polio. She is one of our women in our fair trade corp. She lived in the same house for over 6 years, paying her rent faithfully. One day, her landlord came to her in her house and told her that he wanted her out of the house. He physically forced her out of the house and locked the door. She called me crying, asking for help. I went to the landlord quickly and talked to the landlord, reminding him of the laws of the country, which mandates that for every year a person lives in a house, they are to be given 1 month notice. I told him to open the doors or we would bring legal actions against him. He wanted to know when she would leave, but I informed him that she would leave when she had found a suitable place and not before. I also informed him that she should be left in peace, or he will face consequences. He unlocked the door and allowed her to stay until we could find her a suitable house. In another situation, a woman named Aminata, who is blind, had gone to bed for the evening. You may need to know that in Sierra Leone, there might be many families or groups of people who rent rooms in the same house. After Aminata had gone to bed and locked her room, she was lying on her bed and she sensed someone else in her room. She asked who was there, and a man who had also rented the room in the same house said, "It is me." She asked him what he wanted and how he entered her room. He started to rape her, tearing her clothes. She started to scream for help, and some young men nearby came running. They held the man until I arrived, but asked me to let them settle the matter quietly. I said no. Issues of rape are not issues to be settled quietly. The matter must be taken to the police, who pressed charges on the man, and he was sentenced to 15 years in jail. I could spend the rest of the night telling you stories like this and others, but for the sake of time, I will leave you with these examples. People with disability need those without to stand with them when they are oppressed, abused, and neglected. I love my job so much because I have known injustice. I understand the pain. I am now making a difference. Whatever happens to a person with disability is happening to all of us. God is a God of justice, and He wants us to act on His behalf, to bring about justice to those who are in need. When I was in the focus group of blind women, when Women of Hope was just beginning, they asked us, what are our dreams for the future? Recently, I was reflecting on where God had taken my life, and I realized that everything I had said on that day, 2009, was exactly what I am doing. Advocating for people who have no voice, and making changes in the country that will positively impact people with disability throughout the nation. It is as if God Himself was writing the dreams through my voice on that day, and He is now bringing it to fulfillment. Thank you for opening doors of access for women like us, for women like me, who need you to stand up for us. God will reward you for your sacrifice.